Our seventh sacrament, which is Holy Orders, is being presented tonight by a precious friend of our parish, a local lady from Bridge City who answered the call of God to serve this sacrament as a Sister of Divine Providence. She was here last week on Wednesday night to talk with the children of our parish and said yes to our request to be here tonight and to discuss our seventh sacrament, Holy Orders. So join me in welcoming one really amazing lady that always answers the call to serve, Sister Misty.
Good evening. Good evening. You just set that bar pretty high there, but I'll try to reach it. My name is Sister Misty, and I am actually originally from Bridge City, born and raised. Went to Lamar, graduated with a teaching degree, and was actually a middle school and high school math teacher for 11 years, BC, before convent. And answered that call into religious life and moved into the convent at Our Lady of the Lake University with the Sisters of Divine Providence in San Antonio. And I'll share a little bit about my journey here in a little bit, but I want to talk a little bit about your topic for this evening, which is the Sacrament of Holy Orders. Before I begin, though, I want to see, because I'm that math teacher, I'm going to give you a pop quiz. What is a sacrament? Yeah, if you know it, you can't answer it. No. Any of the sponsors, can any of the sponsors help out? What is a sacrament?
It's an outward sign.
Okay, it's an outward sign.
Instituted by Christ to give grace.
Okay, so that's the old catechism, standard version answer. It's an outward sign instituted by Christ to give grace. Right?
Yes.
All right, pretty good. Now let's break that down and figure out what that means. So when we talk about sacraments, you've already talked about which ones? What's one sacrament?
Baptism.
Baptism. What's another one? Confirmation. Eucharist. Matrimony. Reconciliation. Anointing of the sick, and holy orders. Okay? Did you talk about how they're grouped? Like the sacraments of initiation? That is baptism, confirmation, Eucharist. So you were initiated with those sacraments. The sacraments of healing, which is what I believe Father Shane spoke about, which reconciliation and anointing of the sick. And then I'm going to end up with the second sacrament of service. Mike shared last week about matrimony, and I'm going to share about the sacrament of holy orders tonight. I want to clarify something for you. As a sister, I do not have holy orders. Who is the sacrament of holy orders specifically for? Priests and deacons. Right? And so I just wanted to clarify that. I don't know, maybe I misunderstood what she said earlier, but the sacrament of holy orders are for those who are ordained into the priesthood or to the diaconate. This sacrament of ordination of holy orders is a very special answer to God's call. It's something that we call vocation. I was at St. Anthony's this morning at their school about an hour or so, talking about vocations. And my first question to them was, what is a vocation? What does that word mean?
An occupation.
Kind of an occupation.
A job.
Calling.
Calling. What does that word vocation start with? Like vocal cords, voice, listening to God's voice for our life. And so we all have a vocation. We are all, by our baptism, called into a specific vocation for our life. Some have chosen to answer the vocation of marriage. Some as sisters or brothers in religious life, some as priests or deacons, the ordained life, and then those that are lay, single people who are living their life in another unique way. So there are 4 different, what we would call states of life, right? Marriage, religious life, single life, and priesthood, or ordained life. And so I want to look at the sacrament of holy orders, because this goes back to the very beginning in the Old Testament. Here's a pop quiz. Who is really the first priest figure to appear in the Old Testament?
Melchizedek.
Oh man, you are so good. Melchizedek. And so if you hear, sometimes in the Psalms we talk about, you are a priest forever in the order of Melchizedek. So Melchizedek is like the prefigurement of Christ. And then we continue that with the apostles and with the priests that have been ordained to serve us. Now, by baptism, we are all called to this common priesthood. We are baptized priest, prophet, king. And as an ordained priest, their life is in a special ministry. Okay? What, those of you that have been around the Catholic Church for a while, what specifically can you tell me about this ordination of a priest?
Chastity.
Right? They live a chaste life.
It's like they're married to the church.
Okay, so they're considered the bridegroom of the church, right? So when we talk about priests, and we talk about ordination, we talk about how Christ was the head of the body of the church. The priest is the head of the flock, his parish, his ministry. He's in persona Christi. Maybe you heard that with the Sacrament of Reconciliation, where he's not Christ, but he stands in that place of that Christ figure. What is the difference between a priest and a deacon? What can a deacon do, and what can a priest do?
A deacon can marry and bury, and the priest can celebrate the others.
That's right. Are you in the diaconate program?
What's that?
Not yet.
Not yet. We'll ordain you and move on, right? Okay, so by ordination, priests have a specific connection to the bishop. Okay? They are united with the bishop and at the same time depend on their pastoral functions. So when we talk about the Diocese of Beaumont, the bishop is the head of our local church here in Southeast Texas. The priests that are head of each of the parishes have their own unique ministries within the parish. And the priest promises obedience to the bishop in service of God's people. So they also have this promise of obedience as well. Okay? Now, who can be ordained?
Man.
Okay.
A man.
A man. So 7 sacraments, 6 for women, right?
Yeah.
A man.
Catholic.
Catholic. Have you baptized?
Unmarried. Baptized.
Okay.
No.
No.
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
This is from another religion.
Okay. Here's the question. Can an ordained person get married?
No.
He's already made his vow.
That's right. So an ordained person cannot be married. An ordained man cannot marry. But in the case of a married man who becomes a deacon, he is also receiving the ordination, the gift of ordination. And like you said, he can bury and marry and baptize. That's right. Okay. Now, before we move on, those of you that are coming into the church, any thoughts or questions at this point when we talk about this sacrament of holy orders that you didn't think of before, or questions coming up? If they do, just ask a question, all right? Yes, ma'am.
I'm speaking for them, but I don't know if this is what they're thinking about. Some of them would like to know why they can't get married, why priests cannot get married. You know, why they can't get married. I mean, that question comes up all the time.
We've got married priests in the diocese.
We do have married priests in the diocese. That's right. Do you know their history?
Yes.
Yes.
So let me explain for those of you that might not know, those of you that might be new to this, right? Because it is confusing. The ones that we have were from another faith tradition, and they decided to become Catholic, and their whole family became Catholic. And so they were able to go through whatever training they needed to continue being that priest for the Catholic Church. So yes, we do have a few that are married or had been married. I have a priest friend that was divorced and his marriage was annulled, and he has three grown kids, and he's also a priest. So there are exceptions and there are special circumstances.
I have a question.
Sure.
Is that a prerequisite for them, the whole family, to become Catholic?
I don't know.
Okay, I'm still unclear on this.
Okay, what?
Married but became a priest? How does that work? Run that by me again?
Okay, so for instance, we have, I think it's one, Father Martin Nelson. He and his family were Episcopalian. And he was a priest in the Episcopalian Church for years. So he had his theology, he had formation, and then for whatever reason in their faith journey decided to become Catholic, just like some of you here are. And so he and his family became Catholic, and after some conversation with the bishop, he was able to go through specific, like some extra training or classes or formation and become a Catholic priest. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Would he go through RCIA?
Yeah, he probably had to do something like that.
Would a priest come in from, like background you just described, when they, I'm sorry, perform consecration or hear confession?
Yes. Yes, sir.
I'll bring this up since no one asked. Since there was a married priesthood for the first 1,000 years of the church.
The what?
There was a married priesthood for the first 1,000 years of the church.
Separate?
No.
No.
That's all priests were able to get married.
Okay.
In the beginning.
Okay.
In the beginning, first 1,000 years.
Okay.
The church made a rule, it's not a dogma, made a rule that in order to follow what Jesus and Paul both taught, that it's better for you not to be married if you're going to be a priest and have a priestly ministry, that it would be better for you not to be married, and therefore that is a rule of the church. Could it change? Yes. But it's not likely.
Do they usually, when they're married, or usually it's from Episcopalians, right? It's not just like a Baptist who's married wants to become a priest.
I haven't heard of any, but I guess there could be.
Well, because I've always heard the Episcopalians are really close to the Catholic faith.
Well, that's what
Well, see, in the Baptist tradition, they don't have the sacraments like we do.
Right.
Right.
But that's what I'm saying. Because if a Baptist person who is married, has children, wants to become Catholic and then says, I want to become a priest, would he be able to?
But I think that what it is before the bishop can grant permission, that the Pope has to say that it's okay. So in the case of the Episcopalians, they knew that they were having trouble, so the church made it and said that the Pope did, said it's okay that if they wanted to come into the Catholic Church, that it could be done.
They expanded.
But I think that it would have to be for different, come from the Pope in that respect, and it's not open to just anybody that's married.
Right. It has to have special permission from the Pope and from the higher-ups. You're right. Now, when we talk about this priesthood has a sacramental nature to it, which means that the priest is a sign of what is happening. He's not Christ. He's a sign of what's happening. These sacramental signs represent what they signify by a natural resemblance. Okay, so when we talk about that outward sign instituted by Christ for an inward grace, as Christians, as people, as humans, we need tangible signs that we have 5 senses that we receive input from. And so when a priest is ordained, have you ever been to a priest ordination? Okay.
Yes.
So there are some, I wish I would have brought it, the prayer, the ordination prayer. The words of the ordination, the sacred words, are so beautiful. You have holy oils, you have the chrism, you have the smells, the incense, the laying on of hands, the touch. All of these are ways that are those sacramental signs that help us to know that there's grace that come upon those priests. Now, they are human beings. They are not God. They make mistakes, just like all of us do. And in spite of their humanness, we believe that through their sacramental conference of the Holy Order Sacrament, they receive the grace that they need to perform the ministerial and the pastoral duties that we need them to be for us. Think about your own parish priest. Think about what their days might be like. Full. Busy.
That's another reason for priests not to be married.
That's it. That's a really good logical reason for priests to not be married, because
On call.
they're on call, they're 24/7, they have evening meetings, they have masses on Sundays, they are here to have to live out their baptismal call in a very special way, in a very unique way. I heard Father Steve in Bridge City is leaving, and his last weekend was this past weekend, and one of the things that he said was that as a priest, one of the biggest blessings is to be a pastor at a parish, because there are so many rich experiences that happen and relationships that are formed, but not only that, the connection of healing, the sacrament, your sacramental life depends on the priest. For the most part, your sacramental life depends on the priest. Once they are ordained, and a deacon is ordained, that seal of the sacrament has an indelible mark. It's something that can't ever be taken away. Just like our baptism, we are sealed with the Holy Spirit. We receive baptism once because it doesn't have to be renewed. Now, we renew our baptismal promises every year at Easter time. But to be baptized again, it was done one and done. We have an indelible mark of God's Spirit in our heart. And in confirmation, we receive the gifts and the fruits of the Spirit to confirm that baptismal call and to fulfill it. It's not that we didn't have all of those things, but they come into fulfillment at confirmation. And so during holy orders, as a priest, as a deacon, these men are sealed with an indelible mark that helps them to perform their ministerial duties. Now, I didn't ask him before this, but Father sees you. Do you have anything that you would like to share about what ordination and what your priesthood has meant to you? Would you like to share any personal stories?
I'm sorry, I don't want to. But then I was.
Anything you want to add too?
I was telling her about the difference between there is two kinds of priesthood, like religious and the diocesan. So I'm a religious priest. Father Shane is the diocesan priest. Means Father Shane is directly comes under the authority of bishop, whereas I am or sister is we comes under the superior, the provincial, or we call them superior. So we comes under their authority. But we are obliged to the bishop, but that doesn't mean that we are under him. We work for him, but we are not under him. Do you make sense to you?
Yes.
Okay. And Derek was saying that if there is a time that the Pope allows the priest to marry, the diocesan priest can marry, but not the religious, because we have taken perpetual vow of chastity, poverty and obedience, 3 vows. So we are in no way, we in the sense, religious priests are in no way will be allowed to marry. They can marry if they are so thirsty about it. They can move to, they can switch over to the diocesan priest and then they can go for marriage. But being a religious, that is not possible.
What if they are already married and want to become a priest? Would that fall under religious?
No, in no way. Again, there is a 2 rites. Like, I belong to an Oriental rite. Okay, for us, if a married man to be married, either he has to settle his family. And suppose the wife is dead and gone, and the children are there, and he needs to settle them all, and then maybe at his old age he can get ordained. So we have a priest, just one priest who was married and who lost his wife, and he settled all his children, and at the age of 75 he got ordained as a priest. So that is about the Oriental rites. Okay, and the Roman Catholic canon law, I'm not very sure. As she said, we had a priest in this diocese, so I don't know what that worked as. But I was told that he was never made a pastor, so there may be some restrictions.
Are we talking about
He was an associate.
Oh, he was?
He was an associate.
Parochial vicar, not a master.
That's what I thought. He was never made a pastor, so that may be the restriction. I don't know. My personal experience when I was ordained in 2006, December 28. That was a great day, and as sister said, we cannot express that. And you will see when people are getting, or the priests are getting ordained, all these visible signs. So, but the grace that we receive, it is precious. I don't know how to express that. But it doesn't, now suppose a priest who is not, maybe a priest who drinks, is a drunkard or something like that, addicted to some bad habits, even if he celebrates the Mass, that is a valid Mass, and you don't miss the grace. Okay, it is not depending on the personality of the priest or the quality of the priest, but it is directly from Jesus or from God that you get the grace for any sacrament, administration of any sacrament.
No matter what state of grace that the priest is in at the time of doing a baptism or performing any other of the sacraments, God is bigger than any of his sins. And he is able to work through that priest and give us the sacrament, and we do receive those graces. Okay, so even if you know this little, well, he made me mad, or he did this, or I saw him do that, before you go into reconciliation, it's okay, you still got absolved of your sins. Okay. I do want to kind of segue into what he talked about with religious life, priesthood. Did you know that there were like 2 tracks of being a priest? All right. I'm always amazed because, well, it's unknown. And I love bringing this information to light because you can be that third party who might help somebody else find their vocation. And so when we talk about, most of you here are not going to become priests or even religious, and that's fine. But you probably can help plant the seed to help somebody else respond to that call. And so when we talk about the harvest is plenty and the laborers are few, I remember growing up when I was young at St. Henry, that's my home parish, and on the back of the missalette was this prayer of vocations. And it talked about the harvest is plenty and the laborers are few, and that has stuck with me. But when I was a little, kind of not that smart when I was little, I guess, and I thought that they kept misspelling the word vacation. I didn't know what vacation was. But whenever I really started to pray that prayer, I wanted to be that unique lifestyle. I wanted to be one of the few. I didn't know how that was going to unfold, but there was something when I was in elementary, middle school that caught me. And different people throughout my life would ask me, have you thought of being a sister? And it depended on who was in my life. I would say, yeah, I have, or no way. Or I'm considering it. And so when we talk about helping others find their vocation, it's having conversation. It's knowing where to go and find some resources if somebody comes and asks you. Or, look at the priests that you admire. What are some traits that strike you, that draw you to them? Just call it out. What are some traits that call you to want to be around these priests? Or that motivate you or inspire you? Knowledgeable?
Their understanding.
Understanding?
Their kindness.
Kindness?
That's what I was thinking.
People person.
People person?
And sometimes funny.
Sometimes funny. You have to have, God has a sense of humor, for sure. If you don't know, just make plans. So, in your life right now, do you maybe in your mind, you can think of a young man or a young lady who might have those traits, maybe who like to serve, or maybe you see them in youth group, or maybe you see them at Mass, or maybe they're in your own family, a niece or a nephew, or even a grandchild. That maybe you see those qualities of somebody that you admire and that you think would be a good priest, or to think about. Just because they think about it doesn't mean they have to become one. It's just like if you date one person, it doesn't mean that you're going to have to marry that person. Maybe test the words out a little bit. You have to grow a relationship with one another. Because being a priest, whether it's a diocesan priest, or a religious order priest, or even a sister or a brother, our lives are still about relationship. No matter what. And just like in any relationship, there has to be communication, there has to be some growth, there has to be forgiveness and compassion and understanding, no matter what we do in life, no matter if we're even single. You have people that you work with, you have family that you have to deal with, you have people that don't think the way you do, you have people that don't do it the right way, whatever that it is. And you have to learn to compromise and to figure out what's the best for the greater good. So when we talk about diocesan priesthood, that's what most people understand. And especially in this area, well, kind of overall. When people talk about vocations, what directly comes to your mind? Priest. The priesthood, right? A lot of people think vocation equals priesthood. And it's not just priesthood, but all we know is really diocesan priesthood. Because that's what's familiar. We don't have religious orders around here to know any different. But you have Franciscans, you have Servite Order of the Holy Cross, you have Dominicans, you even have Carmelite friars. Okay, so in the U.S. alone, there are over 700 different congregations of men and women that are not diocesan. They're religious ordered priests or brothers or sisters congregations. Over 500 of those are women's congregations. So there are a lot of different congregations because in religious orders, they follow a specific spirituality. Like Franciscans follow the model of St. Francis, right? Benedictine groups follow the spirituality of St. Benedict, okay? I don't remember which order he is from, he and Father Jason. That's at the
Carmelites.
They're Carmelites, that's right. So they follow the Carmelite rule, like St. Teresa of Lisieux, St. John of the Cross, you know. And so when we talk about religious order priests, they start off with the same kind of formation, the same setup as religious do. For instance, we have kind of different stages. And I equate that with like meeting somebody and going steady and, you know, being a girlfriend or boyfriend and being engaged and then being married. Just to put it in context of something that you might be familiar with, okay? And so they have stages of formation and building relationship, not just with each other, but with God primarily, with their community. And some men do not continue and become priests. Some men become brothers because they want a life of service, but they don't necessarily feel called to become a priest. So they minister in many different ways. Maybe they're minister as a teacher or a counselor or whatever their skill is or whatever that congregation has them doing. But I wanted to bring awareness to you that it's when we talk about vocations, it's more than just holy orders to diocesan priesthood and diaconate. It's also to religious orders, priests, brothers, and sisters. Now, the religious priests also have holy orders, right? As a sister or as a brother, we do not receive holy orders. We make perpetual vows. So back in 2014, I met the sisters in 2011 and ended up going through 2 years of what we call novitiate, which is just some intense training and prayer and studying the vows, religious life, our congregation. And after those 2 years, it's constant discernment. You know, I could have left at any time. And I made my first profession of vows, which meant that I was a real vowed sister. in 2014. On July 4th, 2014, it was my new Independence Day because I got out of novitiate. And I became a DRE in San Antonio. 4 years later, which you have to renew your vows every year. So every year I would renew my vows and say, yes, I want to continue living my vows of poverty, celibacy, and obedience. And at any time during that, it's kind of like the discernment period. I was a real sister. I had the title sister. I had made vows. But at any time, if I had decided to leave, I could have left. Really with no strings attached. And so that's why it's called the annual vows. You have to keep saying yes. Is this really the life I want to lead? Is this really something that I feel called to do? So as I became more involved in ministry, I became closer to our community, I realized that yes, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. And in 2018, almost 2 years ago, I was supposed to make my perpetual profession to be a forever nun. And my dad became very sick. So I asked to move it to Bridge City and move it up about a month. And so I actually made my final profession here at St. Henry in 2018. And like Father Siju said, even though I did not have that sacrament of holy orders, there's something profound that happens when you stand before God and you stand before a community of witnesses, just like there is in a marriage, I'm sure. You feel like it's just the two of you and it's just unexplainable. The grace that happens when you give your life to somebody else in front of the people that have supported you and loved you for that journey. And there's a grace that happens in availability for me personally, in my energy, in my availability, in my desire, because I'm really an introvert. I'm a professional extrovert, but I'm really an introvert. And so when I'm around people and talking and sharing and giving myself, it exhausts me. I enjoy it. Don't get me wrong. I love being around people. And I know that at some point I'm going to have to crawl into a hole and just be quiet. But somehow I never lose that energy when I need it. And the joy that has come from this life, I never thought I would be this happy ever. And so there's definitely a joy in living out these vows, where some people might think that it's limiting. You mean you take vows of poverty, celibacy, and obedience? You can't have anything, you can't do anything you want, and you can't have fun? No, that's not it. For me, it's very freeing. There's a freedom for me. Because part of our vow, what we call our vow formula, when we profess vows, one of the things that we say, and I remember it because it strikes me, is for the vow of celibacy. It's not saying the one thing I can't do, but it's telling me all of the ways that I can love somebody. And part of our vow formula says, I make the vow of poverty so that I can love every person with a warm human Christian love. I can be here and be available for things like tonight. I can go and talk to schools. I don't have endless energy, just like priests don't have endless energy. They have to also take care of themselves. But there's something about that grace of having enough when you need it. And it's not just with us. I think that you probably have all experienced that as well. Whether it's at work or as a parent. There's something precious that God desires to give each one of us if we're only open to it. And whether or not it's the way that you live out your life or the way that you walk day by day in and out, the normal daily ins and outs. What is God calling you to do tomorrow, maybe a little differently than we did today? And I think that the gift of the priesthood in particular, or ordained life in particular, is really a gift to all of us to keep us focused and centered, that there is always somebody there for us. And just like when they are ambassadors for Christ, so to speak, like we need that visual. We like to know that we're not alone. And a priest on the altar, or a priest in confession, or a priest baptizing a baby is kind of that reminder that God's grace and God's love works through all of these sacraments because of the sacrament of holy orders. And so I invite you to think about and consider ways that you personally, you as a parish community, can continue to encourage the few to say yes. Just like in any relationship, it's not easy, but it's worth it. Most likely, like in a marriage, it's not easy, but it's worth it. So here's something to think about. So what could you do to foster vocations to the priesthood? Think about ways that maybe in your life right now, is there one person that you might know that you can go and ask, hey, have you ever thought about being a priest? Or a married person, have you thought about being a deacon? Because sometimes people just need to be asked. Sometimes people need to know that somebody sees a quality in them that they can't see in themselves. Because if you're like me, you probably don't talk too well to yourself and treat yourself too well, and you think that you're not enough, or no, I can't do that. I'm not holy enough. I don't know how to pray good enough. I don't know the scriptures. You don't have to, because God's grace is enough. Remember that little line in scripture? God's grace is enough. And so I encourage you and invite you to think about ways to be that third party and help plant some seeds. Even though that's not my main mission here in Southeast Texas, that is one of my passions. I don't think I told you what I do. I work at the Diocese of Beaumont. I work at the Pastoral Center, and I am what they call a multi-parish coordinator, which is a big fancy word for I work with about 30 parishes with their religious education departments. So I work with all of the parishes in Beaumont, Port Arthur, Orange, Vidor, Bridge City, all of those parishes with their directors of religious ed, with whatever they may need, with teacher training, lesson plans, curriculum, holding their hand, scheduling, just stopping by to say hi and that you're doing a good job kind of thing. And then you get asked to come and do this for RCIA, and so I'm grateful. But because of my family and because of my faith community, that's where I first understood what community was in St. Henry. And from there it grew to the community of women and men that I worked with in youth ministry. And then it was on a diocesan level with the Lamar Student Center. And then it became the Acts community. And that's really kind of where I started hearing God say, all right, are you listening now? And then meeting the Sisters of Providence. And understanding that community was the relationship piece that I was missing in my life. And I want to say that no matter what happens with this shortage of priests, or people aren't responding to, people keep saying they're not responding to religious life. People aren't responding to the call. I really and truly think that more people would be open and willing if they were simply asked. So consider that. Now, I totally did not do the proper adult teaching method here. It was more of a lecture and a teacher and a student thing. But I want to see, do you have any thoughts and insights, or, oh, maybe I can do this moments as we were talking. I don't know how well I did on holy orders, but I think you get the message. I hope you do. I pray that God's grace will take care of it.
It always does.
Always does, right? Ask Brother Shane, he'll tell you. Yes, ma'am.
What about these lay women who, once they're widowed, become sisters?
Yes, we have 2 women in our congregation that were married at one point in their life. They were divorced. Their marriage was annulled. They have children, but their children were older and on their own and able to be independent, and they have become sisters. So it happens. It happens that widows later on can, previously married women or even men can. And again, it depends on the congregation. Every congregation is unique in a sense of their expectations and their rules, so to speak, of who, like how old you have to be, or, some different specifics that go along with entering. But that's all part of the discernment process. Discernment is another big fancy church word for listening to God's will, making decisions with God in mind. So praying, and really understanding what the next journey might be. So yes, that is a possibility.
Well, there's several in Nederland, but all these women are widows.
Mm-hmm. And that's they're giving their self in a special way to serve.
Do they go through any kind of acceptance through the church or anything?
I have no idea. I'm not too familiar with what they do.
Now, Renella, you cannot be a sister, I'm sorry.
You just got put in your place.
Look, Zerby, what did you say?
Break it up.
You can be a sister.
Oh, no.
Just because someone said this is sister, that doesn't mean you're that kind of sister.
But at one point in my life, particularly when I was in training at St. Mary's, I very definitely, as a matter of fact, I broke up with my boyfriend and told him to come back because I had already talked to the nuns there and was going to go into the convent when I graduated from St. Mary's, because I wanted to be in the medical profession.
Mm-hmm. And see, a lot of congregations were created because there was a need in society. A few people gathered to try to fill that need. Schools were formed, hospitals were created, larger groups gathered, so there had to be some kind of ruling, some kind of rules or guidelines to help. And that's really how congregations started. So a lot of them are known for teachers or known for being in the healthcare business. Now what you see, you still see those congregations that are what we call cloistered. That mean they stay in a convent and they do their ministry in the convent. And then you have those of us that go out, like the apostles. We are called apostolic. because we follow what the apostles did and went out. Here's another pop quiz question. What's the difference between a nun and a sister?
Oh, I used to know that. Because we've heard that here before.
I think I was the one that told you that here before. You don't take very good notes.
It's been a few years.
Oh, no, I mean, there is a difference between a nun and a sister. I am a sister.
Sisters from PNG, what was her name? Sister Natalie Skint.
I just kind of gave you the answer. A nun stays in her convent and is cloistered.
Oh, okay.
And a sister who could also wear a habit, but is not called a nun. That's what's confusing. A lot of times people think those that wear a habit are called nuns, but not all women who wear habits are nuns. Nuns specifically stay in a convent in their cloister and minister. Now, back about 50 years ago, the big church meeting called Vatican II had all of the congregations, basically in a nutshell, to go back and look at how their orders began. What did your founder or foundress ask you to do as far as dress, as far as ministry? Our founder was a parish priest in France, and he saw a need to teach the poor girls in the poor hamlets of France. Because, just like anywhere else, the boys were the ones that were educated and the girls stayed home and learned how to cook and clean and sew and mend and, take care of babies. And he saw a need. He kind of stuck his neck out there because he wanted specifically to teach these young women in the poor hamlets of France. And so, in the beginning, he asked 4 women to do that. And he did exactly what the Gospels say. Go without money bags, go without a second tunic, go without. Trust in divine providence. And so these women went out and they were in the middle of these little villages. They had to fend for themselves and to teach. Can you imagine what kind of strong woman that was? I don't know if I could do it.
Renelle can.
Oh, I'm sure she could. She looks like she could take care of her own, no problem.
Were they part of the Poor Clares?
No, they were not part of the Poor Clares. Our founder actually originally called them, now don't tell my superior general, I can't really remember this, or my novice director. We were like the Poor Sisters of something, okay? Of the Little Child Jesus or something like that, okay? But because the community saw how we went out and totally trusted, we didn't have anything and we trusted that God would provide, they are the ones that called us Sisters of Providence. That's how we got our name. And so our specific, people ask me, well, what does your convent do? Well, we do a lot of things. When we talk about what's your charism, charism is simply like a spirit. Your lifestyle. How do you live your life? As Sisters of Divine Providence, we live out just that. We try every day to live out our ministry, our personal life, our family life, whatever, trusting in Divine Providence, trusting that God is going to provide. In the good times and the bad and the struggles, that there's always something good that can come out of any situation. So I want to end with I brought a prayer card with me. Yesterday we actually celebrated his birthday. His name is John Martin Moy, and today is his baptism anniversary. So I thought that would be a neat way to end it. I think I have enough. I just grabbed a stack.
We had Sister Benil.
Yes, she is one of ours.
And I'm trying to think of this sister. I see her in the magazine now.
Well, there were several sisters here. There was a Catholic parent. Karen Cudlack was a counselor at Catholic Charities for a while.
Yeah, Karen.
Catholic parent was Catholic Charities for a while. Benil Broussard was a music teacher around here. She was from Orange, I believe.
She was stationed here for a while.
Oh, was she?
Under Father Dean.
That's right. There's somebody else that was here for a while too.
Maria, is it There was a,
Okay, so when we look at, this is just a beautiful prayer, and it's not an easy prayer to live out, but it's something to challenge us and to invite us into a more trusting relationship with God. So this is a prayer that our founder gave to the sisters way back when, and it's an act of abandonment to divine providence. So if we could stand and we will all say this together, okay? In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Providence of my God, I adore you in all your designs. I place my destiny in your hands, confiding to you all that I have, all that I am, and all that I am to become. My body and my soul, my health and reputation, my life, my death, and my eternal salvation. As I rely entirely upon you and expect all from your goodness, I will not give myself up to any useless anxiety. I confide to you the success of all my undertakings, and in all difficulties I will have recourse to you as a never-failing source of help. I know that you will either preserve me from the evils I dread, or turn them to my good and your glory. Peaceful and contented in all, I will allow your providence to govern my life without worry or over-eagerness. Holy, wise, generous, and loving providence, I thank you for the tender care you have taken of me up to this moment. I humbly and earnestly entreat you to continue the same for me. Direct all that I do, guide me in your ways, govern me at every moment of my life, and bring me to the fullness of being that you have destined for me from all eternity. May I please you and give you glory forever. Amen.
Thanks, Mister.
Well, thank you.